Hey there, I'm a glue stick, so I have one job. I glue kid stuff. So sorry for being jealous of Geico, who does a ton more, like give you 24/7 access to thousands of licensed agents. And Geico has been around for over 75 years and has a 97% customer satisfaction rating. While I've just got mediocre adhesive skills, Geico also has an award-winning mobile app. Uh-oh, arts and crafts time. No eating the glue stick, Miss Lydia!
Geico. Expect great savings and a whole lot more.
This is the Stephen A. Smith Show podcast.
I'm Stephen A. Welcome to hour number 2 of the Stephen A. Smith Show, here with you, as I love to be, every weekday over the airwaves of ESPN Radio. Number to call up as always is 888-729-3776. That's 888-SAY-ESPN. That's the Stephen A. Smith Show in over 250 markets across the United States of America. And, of course, nationwide on ESPN Radio, Sirius XM Style Channel 80. Starting off the year with a little romance is easy at 1-800-Flowers.com. You know, right now when you order a dozen multicolored roses for only $29.99, you'll get another dozen absolutely free. So to order, go to 1-800-Flowers.com/ESPN. You know, before I get back to the callers, let me say this. New York Giants, Indianapolis Colts, and others, they're not the only team. New York Giants are looking at both offensive coordinator Josh McDaniels and defensive coordinator Matt Patricia for the New England Patriots. McDaniels is also a candidate in Indianapolis. Patricia's also a candidate in Detroit. Coaches coming from the Bill Belichick tree are well respected. Nevertheless, he's the one that has had success. Patricia seems to be the right man for the job, it appears. Presentation notwithstanding. Looks a little scraggly, what have you. You know, they usually like that more polished look, but hell. Bill Belichick, Bill Parcells was your coach before. Jim Fossil was your coach before. Ben McAdoo has been your coach with his chubby Pat Riley looking wannabe self. Doesn't really matter. You know, the bearded look on Patricia, who cares? Got a degree in aeronautics? I don't know. New York Daily News clearly is making the case for him to be the next head coach. At least one particular writer is, and more power to him because he may be right. I look at the Giants, and I think their biggest problem is on offense, not defense. I think if Eli Apple, who's going through an awful lot this year on a personal level, can get his head right and get focused, and I'm not knocking him, because remember, he's had legitimate reasons to be a bit distracted, no question about it. But I think if he can get himself focused, I think their defense will be just fine, especially if your offense is able to give you something. Odell Beckham Jr., if he makes a full recovery, you get Eli Manning some protection on the offensive line, you get some semblance of a running game, I think the Giants will be just fine. On offense, that's where their problem lies. So bringing in a defensive-minded coach, one could make the argument that's a plus because the history of your success has been associated with great defenses because Bill Parcells was your head coach and Bill Belichick was your defensive coordinator. The flip side to it, however, is that offense is such a problem. Then anybody that prioritizes that might be the way to go. I don't know. I just knew that Ben McAdoo needed to go. Gettleman, personal relationships with players, whatever the case may be, didn't work out well. I always hold Josh Norman against him, but that's about it. Other than that, Gettleman has done a damn good job as an executive in Carolina. And he didn't hire Ron Rivera, but he kept him on board, and it appeared to be the right decision. You don't run into Von Miller in Denver, you're the Super Bowl champions. It's clear that Gettleman knows what he's doing. It's clear that Gettleman is hardcore. And if you got a guy from the Bill Belichick tree, chances are they're hardcore too. As long as they're not trying to be Bill Belichick like Josh McDaniels tried to do in Denver, you shouldn't have a problem. And Josh McDaniels tried to do that when he was 34. He's a 41-year-old man now. He's older. He's learned his lesson. Chances are he'll be better for it. But Patricia seems to be somebody that's his own guy and won't try to emulate someone else. I don't know whether he's the right man for the job. I just knew that Ben McAdoo was the wrong guy. We shall see. We shall see. Either way you slice it, this thing of feeling the need to pluck somebody from the Belichick tree, Patricia and the Patriots had the #1 ranked defense last year, but that ain't the case this year. Matter of fact, somebody looked at the New England Patriots and they would say, leaves a lot to be desired. This year, however, they are ranked 5th in points, but 29th in yards allowed. Last year, they were #1, number 8 in yards allowed. Year before that, they were number 10 in points allowed. Year before that, they were 8. Year before that, they were 10th. So over the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, now 6 years, they've been a top 10 defense in points allowed. But in that same span, ladies and gentlemen, 3 times they ranked 25th or worst in yards allowed. That's Matt Patricia's record as defensive coordinator. Not to mention the fact that Bill Belichick has a defensive background. So chances are, how much were you doing? Because even though Bill Belichick ain't calling the plays, who knows what he's doing compared to what Matt Patricia's doing? Whereas with Gruden, he takes over the job in Oakland. He's clearly calling the offensive plays. See, all of these things are just questions. It's not doubts, not critiques, just questions. They're worthy of being asked. 888-729, that's 888-SAY-ESPN. Back to the calls we go. Carlton in Tampa. My buddy, how are you, man?
Oh, Lord. I had 3 quick points on 3 issues, but now I got 4.
Oh, sure.
Okay. McDaniels was fired by the Bolin family in the Broncos for cheating, for filming the 49ers practice over in London. And Patricia wore the Goodell clown shirt while he was a member of the New England Patriots.
That is true.
Hold on, 2 reasons why somebody might not want to.
Hold on, Carlton. Wasn't that during the parade?
No, it was
he going
coming
to the
off the Patriots plane from one of their games, He gets depicted, he's walking down the gangplank with a Goodell clown t-shirt on.
That's not a reason to keep him from getting a job, though, Carlton.
It shows bad judgment. It shows really stupid, poor judgment.
No, you're wrong there, Carlton. It doesn't show stupidity. It might show defiance. It might show disrespect. Not necessarily stupidity. What happened to Matt Patricia because of that?
Well, but now that he's aiming for a head coach job, some owners might say, I don't want the leader of my team as a guy depicting the commissioner as a clown.
And some of them might not care because some of them might feel the same way about the commissioner.
No, most of the owners lined up against the Patriots in Deflategate. But my second point, this weekend's game, Patriots game, is the second biggest tomato can playoff game they have ever had, the #1 game being against Tim Tebow in 2011 when Tebow completed all of 9 passes and they lost 45-10. And I love Tim Tebow, but man, he could not throw a football to save his life. Point number 3, it's not a surprise that the lunatic left, as best epitomized by Max Kellerman, believes that there should be no standards, no meritocracy, no demand of achievement from a guy making $100 million a year. Because they believe everybody should just get paid $100 million and not produce anything. But Stephen A., you do not want to work for Max, because if you contradict their snowflake microaggression obsessed agenda, they will purge you, my friend. So you don't want to work for Max.
That might be a good point, but just so everybody knows what you're talking about, you were watching First Take this morning, and Max Kellerman was against my perspective that John Gruden should be able to deliver me a title within 3 to 4 years if you're going to sign for $100 million. Max's definition of success was winning a division and winning a playoff game, and he feels that should be enough to warrant that $100 million. I was like, hell no, I need a hell of a lot more than that. If you're getting $100 million, especially when you haven't coached in 10 years, you're 45-51 the 6 previous years to that, and you went 0-2 in the playoffs. No, I need a Super Bowl title to justify a $100 million contract for a coach. That was the difference between me and Max.
$100 million for one playoff win is not exactly a reasonable expectation, but that's Max's. So, anyway, point number 4. I generally agree with Will Cain 95% of the time. You and I had that discussion in the past. And I agree with him that LeVar Ball is a carnival barker, snake oil salesman fraud. But I vehemently disagree with his point today where he said that Steve Kerr is being a hypocrite because Kerr comments on politics and then objects to ESPN following the Ball family ad nauseum. And here's what I'm going to say is a vast difference. If Steve Kerr spent 50% of his press conferences and 50% of the time that he corresponds with the media talking about politics, well, then maybe Will Cain would be right. But the difference is you folks are obsessed with the Ball family. You have sections on your website called The Ball Talk and the Ball family. You have become the promotional vehicle for this darn family. And that's the difference. You are promoting the snake oil salesman or the carnival barker.
First of all,
difference, my friend.
Time out. First of all, you sat up there and you called about this yesterday. And one of the reasons I vehemently disagreed with you is because it ain't everything and it ain't everybody. ESPN, we've got huge tentacles. We've got a tremendous amount of tentacles. Everybody ain't thinking about the same thing. You just told me something. Carlton, do you realize you called into this show and you just told me something I had absolutely positively no idea about? I didn't know that stuff. In other words, what you just described that ESPN has, the Ball family and following. I don't pay attention to that stuff. I'm doing this show. I'm doing First Take. I ain't pay attention to that. I don't know that. What I'm saying is when you say it, you can't say everybody. And ESPN has an abundance of arms. And by the way, when you bring up Steve Kerr, you want me to tell you something? I disagree with Will Cain about, I didn't say it on the air because we ran out of time, but I disagreed with him about Steve Kerr being a hypocrite as well. Do you know why? Because first of all, I don't think that Steve Kerr comments about that stuff extensively the way that folks try to give the impression about. Secondly, you may have asked him a question and he's simply showing you the courtesy of answering. And thirdly, and more importantly, if anybody has a license as a coach in professional sports to be political, it would be Steve Kerr because of what happened to his father and who his father was. And I think those are the kind of things that need to be taken into consideration, and we need not forget that. Last word, Carlton, real quick. Go ahead.
Well, the 82% in the poll today you ran on your show that said that you should pay less attention to the Ball family. It's not because they're interested in it. It's because they don't want any more promotion of the carnival barker, of the snake oil salesman. Mm-hmm. That's what they're voting against, gotcha. In that poll.
All right. Appreciate the call, Carlton. As always, buddy. Thank you so much. 888-SAY-ESPN. That's 888-729-3776. Back with more of your calls in a minute. You're listening live to the Stephen A. Smith Show, ESPN Radio.
You're listening to the Stephen A. Smith Show podcast.
19 minutes past hour number 2. Back here on the Stephen A. Smith Show. I brought up Steve Kerr's father to the caller, Carlton, who's a friend of the show, does an exceptional job when he calls, and he's always giving us something to think about. But I just wanted to make sure that I either enlightened, reminded, or informed folks about Steve Kerr's father. I certainly didn't mean to bring it up, but what I was saying it to say that when Steve Kerr talks about politics, we need to understand where he's coming from. And it's a voice that we should respect at all times. Steve Kerr's father, Malcolm Kerr, was killed on January 18th, 1984, when Steve Kerr was a freshman at the University of Arizona. He was shot twice in the head by terrorists. Remember that his father was a devoted academic, nearly 18 months into a job as president of the American University in Beirut. And if you read various articles, it all says the same thing, built his life around bridging the divide between Christians, Muslims, and Jews. By all accounts, he was a tremendous man with a beautiful heart that was all about bringing people together before his life was snatched from him by folks who are considered to be pure evil, and those are terrorists. Steve Kerr was a freshman at Arizona at the time. Went out, I don't know if it was that night or the night later, whatever the case may be, and played. Hit 5 of 7 shots in a victory. It was considered his best game as a freshman. That was what Steve Kerr did. 4 years later, in a game at Arizona State, you had folks at the university spewing stuff about his father to rattle him, and it ticked him off so badly, he just went ballistic and dropped about 6 3-pointers in the first half. His nickname was Ice. Veins cold, just go out there and get it done. That's the Steve Kerr that you need to remember when you hear this man talking about politics. I may disagree with him, Rick Carlisle, Coach Stan Van Gundy's position in terms of pointing the finger at ESPN about covering LeVar Ball. I think LeVar Ball's comments about Luke Walton is news. His son is the point guard for the Los Angeles Lakers. I think if he makes comments about Luke Walton, that's news. That doesn't mean we have to agree with it. That doesn't mean he doesn't deserve to be excoriated for it. But to blame the network for publicizing quotes from him, I think is wrong. I respectfully disagree. It doesn't make my reverence, my respect, my admiration for the man and the coach that Steve Kerr is any less. I just respectfully disagree with him, Rick Carlisle, and Stan Van Gundy on this particular issue. But when they speak, I'll listen too. 3 smart and bright and thoughtful individuals who are accomplished coaches in the National Basketball Association, who contribute to me being honored to be associated with the NBA and being a fan of this great sports league of ours. We just respectfully disagree on this issue. But when Steve Kerr has something to say about politics, oh, trust me, I'm going to listen. When you lose your daddy under those circumstances, there's a heightened level of sensitivity that you must have acquired, especially when your dad was the head of a university in Beirut. There's levels of sensitivity due to exposure, if nothing else, that Steve Kerr has that most of us would not. So let's remember that, and let's understand that if and when the time comes that me or anybody else is disagreeing with Steve Kerr on any level about something that he might have to say, please understand that this with respect. We're just respectfully disagreeing. But particularly when it comes to politics and things that affect this nation, especially from a moralistic perspective, you stop and pause and you give deep thought to who it's coming from. Steve Kerr, by virtue of his experiences and his accomplishment as a 5-time champion, as a player, a 2-time champion as a coach, and how thoughtful and kind he is overall, deserves our respect, even when we disagree with him. Never, ever, ever forget that. More to Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio in a minute.
Guess what? You're in the middle of the Stephen A. Smith Show podcast.
Damn it, I mean it! 19 minutes past hour number 2. Back here on the Stephen A. Smith Show. I brought up Steve Kerr's father to the caller, Carlton, who's a friend of the show, does an exceptional job when he calls, and he's always giving us something to think about. But I just wanted to make sure that I either enlightened, reminded, or informed folks about Steve Kerr's father. I certainly didn't mean to bring it up, but what I was saying it to say that when Steve Kerr talks about politics, we need to understand where he's coming from. And it's a voice that we should respect at all times. Steve Kerr's father, Malcolm Kerr, was killed on January 18th, 1984, when Steve Kerr was a freshman at the University of Arizona. He was shot twice in the head by terrorists. Remember that his father was a devoted academic, nearly 18 months into a job as president of the American University in Beirut. And if you read various articles, it all says the same thing, built his life around bridging the divide between Christians, Muslims, and Jews. By all accounts, he was a tremendous man with a beautiful heart that was all about bringing people together before his life was snatched from him by folks who are considered to be pure evil, and those are terrorists. Steve Kerr was a freshman at Arizona at the time. Went out, I don't know if it was that night or the night later or whatever the case may be, and played. Hit 5 of 7 shots in a victory. It was considered his best game as a freshman. That was what Steve Kerr did. 4 years later, in a game at Arizona State, you had folks at the university spewing stuff about his father to rattle him, and it ticked him off so badly, he just went ballistic and dropped about 6 3-pointers in the first half. His nickname was Ice. Veins cold, just go out there and get it done. That's the Steve Kerr that you need to remember when you hear this man talking about politics. I may disagree with him, Rick Carlisle, Coach Stan Van Gundy's position in terms of pointing the finger at ESPN about covering LeVar Ball. I think LeVar Ball's comments about Luke Walton is news. His son is the point guard for the Los Angeles Lakers. I think if he makes comments about Luke Walton, that's news. That doesn't mean we have to agree with it. That doesn't mean he doesn't deserve to be excoriated for it. But to blame the network for publicizing quotes from him, I think is wrong. I respectfully disagree. It doesn't make my reverence, my respect, my admiration for the man and the coach that Steve Kerr is any less. I just respectfully disagree with him, Rick Carlisle, and Stan Van Gundy on this particular issue. But when they speak, I'll listen too. 3 smart and bright and thoughtful individuals who are accomplished coaches in the National Basketball Association, who contribute to me being honored to be associated with the NBA and being a fan of this great sports league of ours. We just respectfully disagree on this issue. But when Steve Kerr has something to say about politics, oh, trust me, I'm going to listen. When you lose your daddy under those circumstances, there's a heightened level of sensitivity that you must have acquired, especially when your dad was the head of a university in Beirut. There's levels of sensitivity due to exposure, if nothing else, that Steve Kerr has that most of us would not. So let's remember that, and let's understand that if and when the time comes that me or anybody else is disagreeing with Steve Kerr on any level about something that he might have to say, please understand that this with respect. We're just respectfully disagreeing. But particularly when it comes to politics and things that affect this nation, especially from a moralistic perspective, you stop and pause and you give deep thought to who it's coming from. Steve Kerr, by virtue of his experiences and his accomplishment as a 5-time champion, as a player, a 2-time champion as a coach, and how thoughtful and kind he is overall, deserves our respect, even when we disagree with him. Never, ever, ever forget that. More to Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio in a minute.
Guess what? You're in the middle of the Stephen A. Smith Show podcast.
Damn it, I mean it! Damn it, I'm very upset. My producer just told me that Billions, which is my favorite show, arguably my favorite show on television, between that and Power, Billions doesn't start until March 25th. That's too long. That's too long. Aaron Sorkin and whoever else is associated with it. It's too long. Hurry up. Hurry up. March 25th? Hey, come on. It's too long. And by the way, you know, who the hell owns Optimum Cable? Could you get your deal done with Stars? You better get it done by the time Power's coming on the air. I'm telling you right now, I better not mess with Amari Hardwick and 50 Cent and La Anthony and everybody. You don't mess with Power either. Get it together. Messing with my shows, man. Messing with my shows. 888-SAY-ESPN. It's 888-729-3776. The NBA is on ESPN Radio, by the way. Tune in tonight as Russell Westbrook and the Thunder visit Jimmy Butler and the Timberwolves. Coverage begins at 7:30 p.m. Eastern on most ESPN radio stations. Check your local listings. Back to the phones we go. Make your points quick before we get on out of here, or I will make them for you. Let's go to Ellie in L.A. You're live with Stephen A. Go ahead.
Hey, thanks a lot, Stephen A. First of all, I just want to say I have so much respect for you. I think you're the smartest man on the air, and I just hope someday I can shake your hand and thank you in person and cross that off my bucket list.
Thank you. Go ahead.
You know, I would like to propose that Luke Walton's job is not to win in 2018. His job as a coach is to get this team ready for next year. He's got young, athletic guys. He's got, I think, the best Lakers team I've seen in 4 or 5 years. They're fun to watch. Yeah, they make a lot of mistakes, especially at the end of games. But Brandon Ingram is improving as a player. Kuzma's improving as a player. And I would even say that Lonzo Ball is improving as a player. As far as I'm concerned, he's doing the job. And I'd like to just, you know, give him kudos. And I don't know if you agree with that. But
well, let me say this. I like Luke Walton. I am excited by the young talent that I see on the Los Angeles Lakers. I think Luke Walton would have won at least 7 to 8 more games if he had 3-point shooting, which is Magic Johnson and Rob Pelinka's job. I am not a critic of Luke Walton. I believe in him. I think he's got promise. Let's see what he does, though. He can't ride the wave of what he did with Golden State. It's about what he's doing here and now. Okay? But I do like him. I do believe in him. And I do believe that he deserves to coach beyond this year because I've seen other guys develop to the point where I'm believing in his coaching. I appreciate the call, man. Thank you so much. Eli in Virginia, you're live with Stephen A. Go ahead real quick.
How you doing, Stephen A? Big time fan, man. Hey, I got a question for you, and I'm going to make a point first. I don't know if you recall during the LA Rams playoff game this past weekend, they showed Goff's father when he threw that touchdown pass.
I saw that. Go ahead real quick.
Why is it top overall draft pick, did they not immediately go to him if it's something that is so, and it's the same city, it's L.A. So why are we so focused on somebody like Lamar Ball, and yet people like that don't get the daylight of time? Is it just because he's so asinine? I mean,
you know what?
That the only thing?
It could be a good point on your part. I think that when we've focused on the Los Angeles Rams, we've been paying attention to Sean McVay and Todd Gurley and Jared Goff and the way that they've been balling, and focused primarily on them. The father and the daddy, he was an aberration in terms of we haven't seen much of him in the news. I think that might have had something to do with it, but you might have a good point, Eli. I can't argue with that. I appreciate the call, though. Thank you. Todd in Arkansas, you're live with Stephen A. Go ahead, buddy.
Hey, Stephen A. Man, I love your show. Appreciate you, buddy. Hey, I just wanted to make a couple comments. Nick Saban, everybody's giving him this thumbs up for making that call. He didn't have a choice, Steven. He didn't have a choice. I mean, anybody could have made that call. I mean, I respect the man, but I don't think he had that big a choice.
Okay, that's fair because I would have made the same call as well because Jalen Hurts was that bad. But There is something to be said about a freshman who's never played not a significant second. It is something to be said about having the courage to bench your starting quarterback for him at halftime of a national championship game.
Now, I agree with that because, you know, he had one. Hurts had one like 26-2.
26-2.
Right,
so that's why he got the credit.
Hey, I'd like to do a shout-out to my Steelers. We're going to send Jacksonville home, then we're going to New England, and we're going to drag Brady through the parking lot, and we're going to let Belichick
Stop. One game at a time, Todd. Calm down. Let's make sure Ben Roethlisberger isn't telling us maybe he doesn't have it anymore. Let's make sure he shows up this weekend before we get to the AFC Championship game part, all right? Take it easy. Have a good day. Let's go to Jay in Compton. You're live with Stephen A. Real quick, Jay, go ahead.
Stephen A., we're giving a platform to a compassionate parent. That's just like giving a megaphone to a parent at a Little League baseball game, and he's going to ruin the whole game, man. Mm-hmm. We're sitting back going, oh, my God, how can he say stuff like this when he shouldn't even be on the air? I've never heard from Brandon Ingram's dad or Kyle Kuzma's mom. Like, LeVar Ball is not an NBA analyst.
So if LeVar Ball says that Lonzo Ball is not being coached right and Luke Walton should be fired, that's not news?
No, because if you ask my mom who's the greatest NBA player of all time,
Stop. Do you play for the Lakers?
That's not the point I'm making.
That is the point. That's the only point that matters. Lonzo Ball is the number 2 overall pick for the Lakers. His father was talking about his coach. That's what the point is. Have a nice day. Shakir in New Jersey, you're live with Stephen A. Real quick, you only got 30 seconds. Go ahead.
Stephen A., diehard Laker fan from New Jersey. I feel like that Luke Walton really should be fired. I mean, LeVar Ball is absolutely right. The way he's coaching just doesn't make sense. Guys are hot.
Okay, that's fair. Do you think it's right for the father, the number 2 overall pick, who's been an awful shooter thus far this year in his rookie campaign, do you think he should be saying that?
Yes, because who knows his son better than him?
I'm sorry?
Yes, who knows his son better than him? He needs a coach who's going to push his button.
So you think that it's okay for a parent to come out and call for a coach to be fired because their son is not playing well 35 to 40 games into their career? Take it easy. We'll talk tomorrow. Stephen A. Smith signing off until 22 hours from now. Until then, peace and love, everybody.
That's just a sample of what you'll hear on the Stephen A. Smith Show. Weekdays at 1 p.m. Eastern on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app.